Good evening and welcome to our sixth webinar. We are happy that we are able to carry on with our online ventures. This webinar is a part of a series of webinars and online symposiums and etc. that we, Department of English, Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh, have been organizing since October. Today it's our privilege and honor to have among us Professor Shireen Huq. She's a professor of North-South University, presently professor of North-South University, Bangladesh. Presently she is in Canada, and today she will reach us, she will talk to us straight from Canada. Welcome and thank you, Professor Shireen Huq, to our today's session. Before we move into our today's session, I would like to request the chair of the Department of English, Jahangirnagar University, Professor Laizu Nasreen, to offer her welcome address. Professor Laizu Nasreen.
Thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today, and it's a matter of really pride and honor as well as pleasure for me that I have here today with me Professor Dr. Shireen Huq, who was my own teacher when I was a student of the Department of English, and also she was my colleague for some years. So I know how rich she is in her own academic area, and like others, I am also eagerly waiting for today's webinar, from which we will be able to know about some very seminal texts as well as issues relating to literature and human psychology. I welcome Professor Dr. Shireen Huq to today's webinar, and also I welcome the audience to today's program. Thanks to all of you.
So, do I begin?
Yes, no, yes, madam.
Okay.
Yes, so thank you, Professor Laizu Nasreen. Yes, so our today's session is about violence, about safeness and unsafeness. And our today's speaker will cover sexual and gendered violence enacted or committed against women, transgender and intersex people, and children. And she will cover two authors, two novels by Arundhati Roy, and a novel by Shamim Akhtar, which is called Talash. And it is our pleasure to share with you. I think we know that Shaheen Akhtar won a very prestigious Asian Literary Award for her novel Talash just a week back. So congratulations, Shaheen Akhtar, the writer, and she is likely to join our session somewhere in time, somewhere in future and very near future. Okay, now today's session will be moderated by Dr. Raihan Sharif of Department of English, Jahangirnagar University. Now, Dr. Raihan Sharif, please start the session.
Thank you, Professor Hussain. I welcome all of you to our excellent webinar by Professor Shireen Huq. I would like to introduce Professor Huq of English and former chair in the Department of English and Modern Languages at North-South University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. She is also a professor and chair at Jahangirnagar University, Dhaka, the University of Chittagong, and in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. She did her PhD from Bombay University, India, under the supervision of the pioneer Indian English poet Nissim Ezekiel. She is a former Fulbright Fellow and the recipient of several US State and British Council grants. I would like to invite Professor Shireen Huq, and you may start your webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. And first of all, let me tell you, it's my great pleasure to be back in a forum of Jahangirnagar University English Department, where I have spent a good number of years, about 9 years I spent over there before I left for the KSA. And it's good to see many familiar faces here, some who were my students then, some whom who were my colleagues and then later became colleagues. It's good. It's been a long time since I have been on any platform, on any forum of Jahangirnagar. but I'm glad to participate today. And during this time of the pandemic, it is good to connect. Okay, my topic today, I chose something when Masroor first contacted me. He said, in your area, something of relevance. Obviously, the topic has to be something of relevance to what is happening around us today. And one can be strictly theoretical, one can be strictly academic, but I believe always in relating everything that I do and everything that I'm teaching in my classes these days to the social scenario around us, because after all, in the final analysis, we are preparing our students for the future and to be members of the community and the society that they belong to. Now, 20 years ago, I taught Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye to my students at Jahangirnagar University, this very department. Picola's multiple rape by her father made me very uncomfortable as a person. I wondered at my uneasiness and realized that it arose from the silence that is usually associated with incest and rape, particularly if it is within the home. By silence here, I mean a tendency to look the other way. Once something as violent as rape happens, or something as violent as incest or pedophilia or whatever, you cannot say that it hasn't happened, but there is always this tendency, particularly in our social mindset now, to look the other way, to sweep it under the carpet, to pretend that is something that has not happened. And if it concerns a member of the home, by which I mean, if the perpetrator is someone belonging in the home, then more so. I don't know what we are trying to do by doing that. Perhaps maintain Victorian respectability, maintain the double layers of hypocrisy that exists in the society. After all, we also have to remember that even when Freud first propounded his seduction theory, where he put forth the theory that women, particularly women, suffer from hysteria and neurosis a lot at later stages because of some violent sexual abuse that was done to them. But after a while, he kind of retracted it and took it to a new direction, took his discussions to a new direction. There was controversy over it much later when someone in one of his, who was the director of his archives, discovered letters which he says that Freud wrote to his friend. And from that, he concludes that Freud perhaps took this stand because he found that too many people around him were involved in this crime. And in fact, there is a suggestion, there is a mention, though I personally have not researched on that, that even his best friend, with whom he was sharing his ideas, was involved in something similar. So that is when he knew that it would be difficult for him, and he kind of retraced his steps. So I can understand it. Ours particularly is a very conservative society, and this is a conservative society's way of trying to protect victims, and I would say the perpetrator too. In some cases, if it is someone known. Now we know Picola lost her mind, for her mother never did anything to either protect her or prevent her father from repeating the act. Perhaps it was not in her power to do so. But silence can be dangerous for the victim. And when we do the same thing, we have to think of it. how is our act of silence impacting upon the victim? And to what extent are we responsible for what is going to happen in the future? So these concerns led me to choose my topic today, and particularly to look at the home, because usually we think of home as a place of refuge, home as a place of love, home as a place of security. All very good. But home can also be a place of many other things. So let us look at that. That is what I would like to do, and see how in each of the three literary texts that I am dealing with, how the protagonist did not get the support that he or she was supposed to get or should have gotten, and moved away from home, and what sort of a role the home has been playing in these circumstances. So the three texts I chose for this are, as you know, Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, which won the Big Booker Prize about what, in 1997, I think. And then I'm also doing I'm going to look at her Ministry of Utmost Happiness, and of course, Shireen Huq's Talash. Now, let me begin with The God of Small Things. This is a brilliant novel. It has so many themes interwoven into it, so many issues interwoven into it, and the narrative structure is brilliant. Arundhati Roy is a writer I admire vastly, but I also admire her not only as a writer, but also as an activist. She's an activist who at times has been compared to Mahashweta Devi for her work amongst the tribals and how she jumps and works from the grassroots. And so obviously I chose her, but then, as I said, The God of Small Things has a lot of things involved in it and suits my topic very well. Along with that, the ministry of, we have in The God of Small Things, we have pedophilia, the first unwanted sexual encounter, the violent sexual encounter of a little innocent boy, and what happens in future to him. Then I have Talash, which of course, as you all know, deals with the life of a Birangana and her sufferings at the camp, but not only her sufferings at the camp, what Shireen Huq, that is something I'll talk about, has done is she carries the tale, the narrative forward after the release from the camp. We don't only stop there. And lastly, we have the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, which of course I might have to do very quickly since I think I've become overambitious in trying to deal with three texts, but I will see at least if I can cover the main grounds. Now, The God of Small Things, as you all know, is set in Imanam, Kerala. It is the story of a pair of zygotic twins, Esther and Rahel, their mother, Amu, Paravan Veluta, who is Amu's lover. It is a story of injustices and inequalities, of classifications, of forced enclosures in a capitalistic patriarchal society, of discriminations, of transgressions, of the violence of expulsion and the violence of assimilation, of trauma and silence. It is also the story of a dysfunctional family and a violent home. Interesting, it begins with pedophilia, moves to a love affair, if you want, you can call it illicit or whatever, between a touchable woman and an untouchable man in a strictly caste-ridden society, and ends with what might be read, and that is how I read it, as incest. So you can see three things over here that she is doing in this society where Arundhati Roy's narrative is challenging these forced enclosures. And as she says, who should love who, love's laws, and how much? But that is not the only issue. I listened to one of her interviews where she thinks that the division into castes and these strict classifications causing this hierarchy in society is responsible for much of India's evil. And that is what she has dealt with over here. We can say that. We don't have a linear narrative here. It is fragmentary, going mainly through the consciousness of Rahel when she returns after 23 years to meet, re-meet her twin Esther. We get glimpses into the 23 years as well as the traumatic incidents of before. Arundhati Roy is, I think you all know, studied architecture in her life. She had been a student of architecture. And you can see always, or at least in the two fictions that she has written, her background training as an architecture student, the way she fashions her narrative. Okay, the narrative begins almost at the end. The crisis comes somewhere in between, and the end comes somewhere in the middle, and the crisis comes absolutely at the end, you see. So this is how and in between she flits back and forth. Now, it begins with Rahel and Esther, baby Kochamma, Ammo, and Oxford returned Uncle Chaco going to the nearest town nearby to welcome Chaco's previous wife, Margaret, and her daughter, Sophie Mall, who were coming from London to visit. On the way, they stop at Abhilash Talkies to watch the film Sound of Music for the umpteenth time. And here, Esther is subjected to his first grisly sexual experience by the orange drink, lemon drink man in the lobby of the theater, leading to traumatic consequences. How does this happen? He is in a familiar place, as we hear. They were there in the umpteenth time. He was with his family who were there inside. You see, excited, he sings. He bursts into song. People feel disturbed. His Ammo asks him to go and wait outside. He goes outside and he is singing. And this is when the danger strikes. This is, familiar places become unfamiliar at these times. We all know what is pedophilia. Pedophilia, let me just give an official definition. It's a psychiatric disorder in which an adult or older adolescent experiences a primary or exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent children. Rahel at this time is 7 years old and only, and therefore he is young enough where he doesn't fall. He is not an adult, he's very young. When he comes outside, the orange drink, lemon drink man, the man who's selling the drinks out at the counter, wakes up from his sleep. Now let us see the two adversaries and how equal they are. And you feel how helpless, you can immediately see how helpless Esther is in this situation. He is perhaps one of the most helpless characters over here, who is betrayed by the adult world. There may be many reasons for pedophilia, and researchers have identified many, but the perpetrator is not my subject over here. The victim is. So let us see. First we have Esther in his pointed beige shoes, his puffed hair, and singing in a voice like the nun. On the other hand, we have the orange drink, lemon drink man with his gold wristwatch, gold chain, chest hidden by hair, steely menacing eyes, unshaven jowly face, teeth which smelled, tumbling nails which are very long. with the air hostess's heart trapped in a bared body. I think Roy here has deliberately painted the picture of evil. All perpetrators don't have to look so evil. They can be well hidden behind an angelic face. The sentence over here is, and waiting he wiped, and wiping he waited, and watched Esther sing. The leopard ready to pounce on his prey. We can also see his process of operation. First, intimidating the young child. He said, "You're not supposed to sing here. I will file a written complaint against you." Then a show of friendliness. "Oh, okay, anyway, come and have a drink." Then again, intimidating. "Where do you live? Who are you? Where do you live?" Taking Esther's identity from him. And finally, manipulating him behind the counter by telling him that it's not legal to serve drinks at the time of while the show is going on. And when Esther comes unsuspectingly behind the counter, he puts his genitalia into Esther's hands. So he held a bottle. So this is Esther. He held a bottle in one hand and a penis in the other. Hard, hot, veiny, not a moonbeam. He was singing a song from The Sound of Music in the voice of a nun, and now suddenly he is over here. Now, if you wish to be judgmental, you can say, why does Esther comply? The lobby was a familiar place for him. His parents, as I said, his mother was close by, etc. Was it the shock of the experience, a violence committed on his psyche that made him numb so he couldn't react? It has been suggested by a critic that it was also his politeness to an elder, culturally drilled in him by his mother, that numbed him. Or perhaps it was the fear of the uncouth man, or perhaps it was a combination of all. We see the effect on Esther after this. After the incident, he suddenly begins to feel dirty. And just give me a minute. Okay, after the incident, he feels dirty. He holds his hand away from himself, the hand with which he had touched the man's organ. Then, and he starts feeling very unclean. When he goes inside, he sees the children on the screen. They are all clean. Only he feels dirty. In his imagination, he asks the father, Christopher Plummer, if the father will accept him as a son, and he refuses. So a rejection by his father comes here. He begins to feel vomity, a bottomless, bottomful feeling. You see, from now on, in Esther's mind is associated the sticky white fluid that had fallen on his hand a little while back, the orange juice, lemon juice that he had drunk afterwards, and it was always associated in a muddle in his head. And later on, it will be associated with the blood of someone else. It is his first taste of fear. He feels feverish. He needs to go out, and he needs to throw up. In the hotel, he vomited a clear, bitter, lemony, sparkling, fizzy liquid, an attempt to clean himself of the uncleanliness of his experience with the orange drink, lemon drink mask. Most important, he begins to feel shameful, guilty, which makes him think Ammu will love him less. There is always the fear of rejection from Ammu. Those of you, and I'm sure all of you have, you know that his parents were divorced. He comes from a broken home. There had been a lot of violence in that home, and the two kids were with the mother, and there was always that fear in him, that the mother would reject them and send them away from her. So he starts feeling this shame. So we can see the impact that sets down upon him the trauma that is happening to him. But you see, trauma also needs to be released. Trauma needs to be shared. As Carruth explains, trauma is a response, sometimes delayed, to an overwhelming event or events which take the form of repeated intrusive hallucinations, dreams, thoughts, and behaviors. Stemming from the event along with numbing that may have begun during or after the experience, and also increased arousal and avoidance of stimuli recalling the event. So we can see the numbness setting down upon him. The unfortunate part of it is that he cannot share it. The telling and the retelling sometimes also helps. And that is one of the most effective ways, as psychoanalysts and psychiatrists have discovered, when you tell, the repressed fear comes out. Esther doesn't have anyone to share it with. That night, he moves away from Ammu's bed and goes and sleeps with his twin, who, by looking at him, knows that something has happened, though perhaps at her age, he doesn't know exactly what it is. When they go back home, Esther is very afraid. Esther is afraid that the orange drink, lemon drink man will come to Pickle House, and Ammu will not be able to protect him. Rather, her cultural practices will tell her to invite the man in and offer him a drink or a juice. So Esther wants to put a distance between himself and the orange drink, lemon drink man. And this is when he decides to run away to History House. And it is when they run away with, of course, Rahim. It is when they run away to History House in that journey that their cousin, who was with them, drowns. And that is when the next traumatic experience occurs for Esther, and this time Rahel as well. Why? Because they witness the battering of the man they loved very much, mother as well as the children, the paravan or the untouchable named Velutha. And they stood and witnessed the destruction of his body, which was actually the site, which became a site for the contestation between the touchables and the untouchables. So they saw that. He saw the blood and the sticky fluid coming from Velutha's brain as he was being battered by, I will call, law enforcers, because what they did was strictly against the law. Anyway, their childhood innocence, both Rahel and Esther's childhood innocence, is destroyed forever. And then on top of that, they are taken to the police station, and their grand aunt, baby Kochamma, manipulates the children and manipulates Esther into telling a lie against Velutha, certifying that he is the murderer of their cousin, the cousin who had actually drowned. So not only has he seen the battering and the smashing of a body which is very much beloved to him, but he has also actually helped. He thinks he has helped. Actually, Velutha would have died anyway. He has actually helped to help him die. Actually killed him, he feels. Then he is separated from his mother, sent off to his father. So all this, he is separated from his twin. All these things together makes Esther the Esther that we see him. Esther stops communicating after this. No one can say when he stopped talking, at what point he stopped talking, but he stopped talking. He withdrew himself, and as it is written in the text, he occupied very, very little space. So here we see what happens to Esther. Circumstances worked, and how one trauma led to another traumatic experience, and how the second traumatic experience released the first traumatic experience, so that the ejaculation of the orange drink, lemon drink man, the blood of Velutha, everything was in his mind all the time. And these came back to him in nightmares. So the story, actually the book begins at this point, but all this has happened earlier. Now, I'll just move on. So I have to finish. The effect, on the other hand, he drops out of his studies. And on Rahel also, the badgering of Velutha has an effect. She stops feeling. He stops talking. She stops feeling. No one cares for her. Her mother dies. Her uncle and grandmother don't care for her anymore, though they pay her maintenance. She's left on her own. The fact that she has stopped feeling, her husband discovers to his dismay, because her eyes always have a faraway look. So we can see after, and 23 years pass, and for 23 years, the two twins who are now grown up have not been able to share what happened that day. They have not been able to share their traumatic experience. And this is what we see over here. Finally, after 23 years, they meet. They share the unspoken, and for only then the two know it, and it is possible to look to a time when they will be able to surmount the trauma. At least a beginning has been made. Now, what is it that led me to feel that what we see happening now is incest? Though I would not be judgmental about it, because I strongly feel that external forces combine to bring them to this point. And one can feel happy that at least a beginning of sharing has been made between the two. But if you are not happy with this state of affairs, then, as I said, it is only the external and familial conditions that brought this about. Now, the home over here. What is the role of the home over here with regard to the experience and the trauma of the twins? The home here is oppressive and insecure, and it has been associated with violence, including child abuse, all through generations. We have Papachi battering Mamachi. We have Ammu being prostituted by her husband, and we have Ammu and her husband passing the two kids like balloons between them, tossing them, and Ammu saying, "You keep one, I will keep one." We see Ammu always being too, though she loved them, but always too strict with them, whacking them, not talking to them, no dialogue between them. So the children always roamed on their own. And overall, there was always the fear that Ammu would send them away. And it was always there. The home also is very, very vulnerable. Why? Because Esther is afraid that the orange drink, lemon drink man will come to Paradise Pickles, and Ammu will welcome him inside. So he must move away from this space. This space cannot protect him. It is too vulnerable. The home also is threatening. If the orange drink, lemon drink man comes to Pickle House, he will be exposed to the same experience. And so he has to go away, and he thinks the history house is safer. As I mentioned before, he flees with Rahel only to be witnesses to Velutha's death. Where then are the friendly spaces the safe ones. And as I said, the borders between them are very, very blurred. What is safe may become unsafe, and what is unsafe often reconfigures, and becomes safe. Let's see. If you read this text closely, the outside, the riverbank, where the Paravans are living, where they are loitering, well, the adults think these are the unsafe places. The children are asked not to go there. Velutha is a Paravan with a future, intelligent, but he has also written his political. He has also written his name in the Marxist party. He has got a card. So he is considered as unsafe. And the grand aunt tells them to stay away from him. But Velutha the Paravan mingles in the children's world. He's the one who plays with them. He's the one who loves them. He's the one who teaches them how to fish. And I have often thought that if given a bit more time, maybe Esther would have confided in him. Perhaps he is the person to whom Esther could have turned to for support, which he couldn't do with the others. But Velutha is the adversary over here to the adults, but to the children it is different. And Velutha is the only person in whose arms Ammu finds that home, that little space. They had nothing else, that little space of their bodies, you see, where Ammu finds the home and the security that neither her father nor her husband had been able to give her. So how can we think of Velutha as unsafe? The law enforcers consider him a murderer, a rapist, and they killed him. As I said, I'll not call them the police, I'll call them the law enforcers, because they are the state apparatus and they have used their power to batter someone down who is helpless before them. So let us look at some of the other parts. So who is safe here and who is unsafe? Which space is safe? Which space is unsafe? The borders are too blurred between safe and unsafe. Esther thinks the history house is safe. He wants to go there with Rahel. But the history house proves dangerous. This is where he had the second experiences, the second traumatic incident. It is here that their lives fall apart. The police station and the law enforcers are safe, but the law enforcers unfairly kill a man. The police station is safe. But it is over here that Ammu is humiliated and is called a Vetsha by the police officer who does it for his own purpose because he wants to get his own through. Therefore, who is safe? Who is unsafe? We don't know. Which space is safe? Which space is a heaven? Where would the children turn? And that is what ultimately led them that only Esther and Rahel are safe. Perhaps this is the space that is safe for them. This is their heaven. Take it as you like. Next, I will move on. I know that the time is moving very fast. So I will just quickly move on to Talash. I will not go into that, Shireen Huq was awarded the Gemcon Shahitya Puruskar, and she has already been introduced as winning another recent prize and all that. But however, we do know that Talash is based on the experiences of the late Ferdowsi Priyobashini, Birangana herself, perhaps one of the first who announced herself, as a Birangana when the war tribunals were being formed. The novel itself narrates the abduction, rape, and sufferings of a young girl at the hands of the Pakistani enemy soldiers in 1971, and her life and eventual suicide after she is rescued from the camp. Shireen Huq does a brilliant job of narrating the brutalities committed on the women in the enemy camp and also their resettlement or rehabilitation in a society after the war. Now, rape in war is well known. Just a minute. How much time do I have?
Madam, carry on 10, 15 minutes. Is it fine for you?
Can I carry on for another 20 minutes? Then I'll try to cover these 10 minutes and the other one for 10 minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
sure. Yes.
I'll just take, okay?
Yes.
So in my watch, it's now 20 to 10. I'll try and close at 10, okay? And then you can open it and the rest I will do through discussion. So I'm going to skip now. From eons back, we know that soldiers raped in war. We have heard of we know how Iliad began. Over a girl, the two heroes were fighting over a girl who was their loot in war. So it has been there. Now, why do soldiers rape in war? That is important. Susan Brown Miller's theory is that the woman's body over here becomes a site of contestation between the invader army and the invaded army, you see? And just as the invader army loots the invaded army's material things like burns houses, destroys things, so they also take the woman, they possess the woman, and they show the ones they are invading, look, you couldn't protect her. Now we have got her, to break the morale. And that is why they have all these brutalities and atrocities. And that is one of the important reasons why women are raped in war. Okay, so women are raped in war, and so were they in Bangladesh during the 1971 war. You can get the official figures. I am not going to go into that. You can get the official figures from the Liberation War Memorial and the official Bangladesh government website. Now, sadly, the body on which this battle is being waged is battered beyond recognition. It's a contestation between two forces, two enemy forces. But the third party is there in between, the site. And that body on which this battle is being waged is battered and badgered and broken beyond recognition, like Velutha's body in A God of Small Things. But like Velutha's crushed body perhaps became a testimony to the evil of the caste system, so the battered bodies of these women are a testimony to the violence and brutality of the evil that is rape, not only in war, but for all times. Physically wrecked, psychologically traumatized, the women, once they were released from the camp, had to face the ground realities of society and family. And this is where, through the narrative of Mary, Shireen Huq does a brilliant job doing what most previous novels dealing with this story of raped women had not done. I have read, I will not say I've read all of them, but I have read Shaukat Osman's Nekre Oronno. It is a narrative of raped women. I have read, but not beyond that. I have read Rizia Rahman's Rokter Okkore, and again it starts with a Birangana, shows her going to the brothel, but then she shifts her focus. Rape itself is covered within the confines of its own layers of silence. In this case, at the state level, there was an acceptance, and they have accepted that, okay, so many women have been raped at the state level. The father of the nation himself accepted them, gave them the status of his mothers, gave them the title of Viranganas, which means war heroines. Steps were taken for their treatment and training and rehabilitation by the state. But there are two levels, the state and the society. At the second level, I think there is a kind of what I feel is silence. If they would rather be silent, that such things would happen. They would rather not accept that their women had been raped. Families would have been happy if these women had not come back, because they think from in their mindset that these women are henceforth going to be a shame for them. They are raped women. Our society is too obsessed with this theory of chaste, unchaste. Strict classifications. You are chaste, you are a good woman. You are unchaste, you are a bad woman. You have been raped, you are unchaste, you are bad. You see? And these women have been in the hands of enemy perpetrators. So what sort of bad women they are, that only the families of these women knew. Now, there is one other area of silence over here, which I would mention very briefly, and that has occurred to me. There were these women, many of them were pregnant, and their fetuses were aborted. Perhaps the decision-making authorities did what seemed to them practical at that time. But that itself raises a question of the, I hope you understand what I mean, silence. Why could we not bring these children into the world? Have we drawn a silence over there? It was not until a few years back with Mustafa Chaudhury's groundbreaking work of Ekattorer Juddho Shishur Abhidito Itihash that the war children issue came to the forefront. But then these war children are children who were brought where I am now in Canada, and they have grown up here. So they are not associated with either Bangladesh or with the war over there. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up is recently I'm having a research on post-memory, and the question came to me, so for the Biranganas, who will be their post-memory generation? I remember Toni Morrison's Beloved, when I saw the movie, the voice of the daughter going on telling the mother, say, tell me, tell me, tell me. It rings in my ears still. It was such fantastic acting. Trauma has to be narrated for it to be carried on. The post-memory generation is the hinge generation. They are the ones who will carry the trauma. It is when they internalize the trauma of the victims and then they carry it forward. Don't forget that this is the generation that many years from now, 100 years, 200, 500 years later, it's generation after generation, this trauma has to be passed on. There is a silence here for the Biranganas. And the Biranganas are neither writing memoirs. Yes, some interviews are there, but those are interviews. They are neither writing memoirs, which the freedom fighters are writing. Again, the stigma associated with rape will not let them, nor do they have these children. So their own narratives are closing after them. Okay. Coming once, all right, now I will come to the society once more. Though the father of the nation called them Birangana, Mary, the protagonist of this novel, of this piece, found that at this level, the second level, Birangana only meant a whore. And the worst kinds of slangs were used against them by all. And she realizes the title Birangana itself identifies her immediately as a raped woman, which again identifies her as a fallen woman. Her family was not too keen to welcome her back. Better she had died, for where will they hide this shame now? Mary's father awaits the return of his freedom fighter's son. Freedom fighter's son's return, but does not even advertise for her. She comes back unwanted. When she comes back, she is in a trauma, which is bound to happen. And we see the symptoms in her. She can't focus, she has nightmares, she remembers the gruesome deaths of her campmates repeatedly, she is irritable, she also becomes very aggressive, and she flaunts her, and sometimes she flaunts her raped condition on others' faces. She can only relate to the other Bidanganas, not to others in society. Okay, now once she is back, the society and her family, this is her family, her father and mother, think the only way they can retrieve her respectability is to get her married off. Marriage is the only one which can be a cure for this unchastity. She needs help for her psychological condition. She doesn't need a husband at this point. And least of all, a mentally challenged one, who is the only one. This is the candidate her parents fixed for her. Anyone and everyone will do. So she flees. And when she flees, her father picks up a kitchen knife, or in Bangla, what we call a boti, and waits. He will kill her. When she returns, he asks her to get out. But he is mourning and celebrating the death of his freedom fighter's son. So she loses the space of hope, if that is a hope. She moves. She moves to the hostel. She moves to the street. She wanders. And then finally, she does get married. Now this is another home. Usually we associate home with parents, for a woman here with husband. When Mary does marry, her husband Mumtaz uses her as a prostitute. You see, he is used to enjoying prostitutes on the grass in Ramna Park. And the police were getting a bit difficult. So she is a more comfortable arrangement. She is never a wife to him. And gradually he takes on the appearance and behavior of the perpetrators: alcoholism, abuse, and unthinkable violence. She relieves the pain of her trauma every time she is intimate with him. Finally, she leaves him. She is disoriented. The home turns bizarre, unfamiliar, and violent. She leaves him. But none of the men who follow him, they don't marry her, but they come to her as lovers. Not even as lovers, they come more as clients. They give her food and they take her body. Even the people that she knew earlier. So subsequently, she goes to the brothel in Tanbazar and Kandupatti. And finally, she commits suicide. I am not too happy with this suicide. Though Shireen Huq had once told me that the positive side is that she admits that it is glorious to die in a beautiful country like Bangladesh. So that means we are accepting the treatment and the attitude of society towards the Biranganas. But I would like to think more positively, and I would like to think that her suicide and death is a testimony to the violence that has been committed upon her body by friend and foe alike for future generations. And if it ends on that note, and if the author had thought along those lines, well, that is my interpretation of it. Now I'll just quickly go over the Ministry of Utmost Happiness. It deals with the identity crisis on one level, the trauma and crisis for identity of an intersex person. There's a difference between a transgender and an intersex. And the character over here is an intersex, because a transgender, if you look at the definitions, and that is why I'm using the term, is a person who's assigned a sex at birth, but is not happy with it. But an intersex is not assigned a sex, you see. Either the chromosome level or the genitalia or something is ambiguous, and it is difficult to assign a sex to this person. Anyway, so Anjum is born as Aftab, and when his mother is examining him, she notices that underneath the male genitalia is a very small, underdeveloped female genitalia. She, of course, cannot accept it, and she wonders why this has happened to her. But it is through the intersex. Actually, this is not where Roy stops. It is not, it is the trauma of the life of an intersex, but in the intersex, in carrying both sexes in one body, is the best choice in a narrative where the author shows India as a land of diversity and the importance of creating a harmony within this diversity, something that Anjum, the intersex character, succeeds in doing. Later on, in the graveyard turned cemetery, we have numerous instances of Anjum's own personal trauma where the parents want him to be a boy, he wants to be a girl, and violence is repeatedly enacted on this body of Aftab Anjum, either to turn him into a boy or to turn him into a woman. But none of these surgeries are successful, and he faces the crisis. And the worst part is that, as with the previous two protagonists, he goes away from home because the home is not a familiar space anymore for him. He joins the band of intersex people in the house known as Khabga. At first, he thinks it is wonderful, it's glamorous because he sees only the outside. Later on, he realizes the harsh reality of their lives. But one incident here is important. On his 18th birthday, when he thinks he is happy to take on the appearance of a female, and he dresses up in bridal attire, but that night when he is sleeping, you see, his male sexual pleasure comes on to his clothes, and he wakes up in his sleep, and he realizes that he cannot bring the two identities together. He cannot be a full woman, and he cannot ignore the male part of his personality. He howls in pain. The next incident that happens, and this is very important in Anjum, it eventually plays a role in Anjum settling with the crisis in his identity, is when she, I will refer to her as she, is now is caught in one of the political turbulences in India when she's traveling to Delhi to visit a shrine, and the Muslims are being massacred by the Hindus. The other Muslims around her, her own companion, is butchered. They approach her to kill her, and then suddenly one of them says, "No, ye hijra hai." And killing a hijra will bring bad luck to them. So the only reason her life is spared is because if they kill her, they will get bad luck. That, and for the first time, you know, she's shocked, she's stunned. This is the only value of her life. Like Velutha was stunned when Mamachi had spat on his face, realizing once and for all what his station with her was, what his situation with her was. She goes into a trauma after this. She stops speaking, she stops laughing, she cuts her hair, she sheds all her female clothes, wears a Pathan suit, etc. And she leaves the Khabga. Where does she go? She goes to the graveyard. With all her clothes, her steel almirah, a Persian carpet, she sleeps amongst the graves. She doesn't talk to anyone. She lets herself go. Her teeth start falling, her hair becomes undyed. She looks like an old crow, as she calls herself. But the appearance of Saddam over there, Saddam, who has taken on the name from Saddam Hussein, who is a Dalit turned Muslim, who has his own traumatic story to tell. And this sharing between the two, and the sharing of traumatic stories I'm going to skip of other transgenders finally brings Anjum out of her trauma. She surmounts it. And what they do is, this is the best part, is they turn the graveyard into the Jannat guest house. They bring in electricity, they bring in water. You know, here you can again see Arundhati, the architect, working. And they set up little guest houses, they cook biryani, they celebrate Eid, they celebrate Bakrid. Who are the guests of Anjum? All people who are passing for other people. For instance, you have over here Saddam, you have Tilo, who is born of a Syrian Christian mother and Dalit father. And Arundhati, in one of her interviews again, said that Tilo is the fictional child of Velutha and Ammu. You have Revati, who is a child born of the violence of rape. You have her mother, Revati's daughter, Jabin the two. And you have Revati herself, who again was raped, who is a Maoist and was raped by law enforcers, gang raped. So Jabin the two is the child born of this wedlock. Arundhati, the narrative begins and ends with the graveyard. The graveyard now becomes a symbol of the unity in diversity that the nation needs. Only we are left with the question as we read that is this a viable solution? Are the people who are involved over here, do we really see them being able to carry the movement forward of bringing in a new India? Yes, it seems fragile, but then there is still hope. So all three novels, I will just conclude with this thing, have similar characteristics of the blurring between safe and unsafe places, of the home being bizarre, of the home being responsible for a lot of the violence, within the home, and places which are unsafe and marked as dangerous, like the brothel or the riverbank, or places like that, or the graveyard with addicts and all that, which is infested with addicts. They turn more into a home. And perhaps the thing that comes from all these three is home is created in that little space when two souls bond together. So with that, I will bring this to a conclusion. I have not overstepped my time too much by 5 minutes, and I am open to questions for the next 10 minutes, if the questions will only come on the chat box. Observations, questions, whatever. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shireen Huq. Raihan Sharif probably has been facing some technological glitches. Yeah, let me carry on.
Let me go into the chat.
Yes, yes. Let's inform the audience that if you want to ask questions, please raise your hand. That will help us locate you and open the question session. From chat, we may find out one question. It was made by Shumon Kolulpal, and his question is there any particular...
Yeah, I've seen the question. I've seen the question.
Yes.
Any particular working definition of home would you suggest here? Any spatial or emotional dimensions to it? Doesn't this happen to the child in the God outside home? I thought I had, when I was discussing the God of small things, and I talked about the home, and I brought in Velutha and the riverbank, I thought that is what I was answering. Yes, I would say that a particular working definition of home does not have to be that space where your family lives or that space which we conventionally call home, but it has to be a space where you can bond, where you can share, where you can protect, particularly where you can share, you see. For instance, in Talash, now I don't know if you all will like it or not. In Talash, when I was reading, there were times when I felt that even when the women were in the enemy camp, you see, when Mary was in the enemy camp with the other women, they were kept in a hall, which by itself was very, very dangerous because they were repeatedly being raped over there, they were repeatedly being attacked over there, and so on and so forth. Physically very dangerous. But when the women stayed with one another, that little spatial space of their sharing seemed to be loving, comforting, you know, and this is the memory they carried to a large extent sometimes in the home when they went to their actual homes. So yes, I agree with you that this happens to the child in the God outside home. I have already suggested, given my suggestion. If you have any other suggestion, you can forward it. To me, the space that we see outside, the Lutha or the riverbank, where he played with them, that is more of a home. The bonding, the love, even though Orundhotu received very, very bad, strict letters from certain people who said that because of that last love-making scene between Velutha and Ammo, she was promoting pornography and she was corrupting the morals of the people of South India. So anyway, but I would think that that last scene is the one that, to me, that really strikes a chord and that really gives that thing that when it says over there that they had nothing else but this space where they held each other. You see, that to me is home. I don't know if I have, well, I've given my viewpoint. I hope I have answered your question. The next is?
There's a question answer chat. This is a question from Tasneem Amin.
Okay. Yes, Tasneem. What's your question?
Yes, Tasneem, would you like to make the question?
She hasn't put it here, has she?
Yes, she has. I mean, in the questions.
I don't see it.
Okay, let me see if I can get her into talk.
Oh, no, it has gone. Sorry.
Yes, Tasneem, I think you are able to talk now.
Yes, sir. And Assalamualaikum, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see anyone. Can you just give me a minute? I have to call my technician, which is my grandson.
No, madam, it's fine. Madam, it's fine. I mean,
right.
They might not be visible because of the technology.
Okay,
yes,
all right, fine. Oh,
yes.
They will not be visible. All right, come on. Yes, Tasneem.
Okay, ma'am. I just would like to ask you that in every cases, I found that the victims are opening up to another fellow victim, and those victims, all of them almost are thrown out of the house. So if they talk to each other only, and if they find the least peace by sharing with another victim, but not in the society, but not with the others who are equally thrown out of the home, then how will the silence be broken? Or is it possible that the silence will be ever broken?
You see, as far as I know, trauma needs sharing. Trauma needs you to be able to speak out. So, to someone else. Now, that someone else may have been a victim. So you are sharing. And by sharing, at least you are moving forward. Those victims that we saw in these novels, not necessarily that it has to happen always, but over here, that is what because you see, the other victim understands the pain. When two victims are together, they understand the pain of each other, which a third person may not know, may not be able to understand. And that is why they are able to correlate more. There has to be some sharing ground. I think it is possible, and it is possible to move forward. And I think they have shown it here that in each case, they are able to move forward. Yes, Tasneem, I hope I have answered your question. The next one, please.
Yes. Is there any question? So you can raise your hand so that we can let you allow to make question or any kind of observation.
Yeah, observation or any point of discussion which we can have.
Yeah.
Your
Okay.
interpretation of something, one of these novels maybe.
Yes, and particularly the focus of this talk is on one of the focuses is on the ending of each of these.
Yeah, which I was not able to read, but
yes.
Yeah, should I?
Yes. No, I mean, can you just tell us how does the end? I mean, referring to all these three novels. I mean,
you want me to say that? You want me to talk?
Yes, maybe in
okay, come on.
Change.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll do that. Now, let's take The God of Small Things first. I had said I would read it, but time constraint, I decided to put it by. Now, The God of Small Things. The book ends with the lovemaking between the book, I did not say the narrative, between Velutha and Ammu. The story ends with the intimate scene between Esther and Rahel. You see, reading which I said that I see incest over here. Arundhati herself said that she did not mean incest, she only meant a very special bonding between the two. Now, whether she said it for society's sake, I don't know, but that is what she said. But I differ a little bit. Now, why I will say this? Now, as far as Velutha and Ammu are concerned, see, they live by telling each other tomorrow in their language, the South Indian language, Nala, I think they say. So that means tomorrow. This tomorrow means for them that they will, tomorrow, in terms of time. And that never comes because the next day, the world broke apart from them, for them. But for me as a reader, I take that tomorrow for a time in the future when this caste system, this classification will not be there, where each is put into a separate compartment and for the purpose of control and controlled, where they can cross borders, where they can meet, where Ammu and Velutha don't only need to have that little space, where that space can broaden a future. And where Esther, and if we go back to the end of the story with Esther and Rahel, there also, as I said, yes, one can be positive or negative, or one can be negative about such a relationship at all coming, but at least to me it seems a beginning of sharing. 23 years, neither of them communicating, but at least that sharing. So again, a new future. And the way she has structured the narrative is that Esther puts her head on, Rahel puts her head on Esther's shoulder, and immediately she goes to Ammu and Velutha, you see, and it seems to move very smoothly from one to the other. So that is the God of Small Things. Now coming to Talash, it's really a very surreal ending. It's suicide, but it is very placed, narrated very surreally. And if we are to take, as I said, again, what Shireen Akhtar is trying to do over here also, to look into a new future, because one may be disappointed at the state of affairs now, at the turn that made his life has taken now. But the last words, I think, towards the end are that at least it is glorious to die in this beautiful country, in a new, independent, beautiful country. So the positive side of her sacrifice is upheld, which is why I said that her battered body, her death, like Velutha's, will bear testimony to the evils of this violence called rape. I don't know if it has been any lesson, not from what is happening around us socially, but anyway, that's literature. And as far as the Ministry of Utmost Happiness is concerned, in the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, it begins with the graveyard, it ends with the graveyard, and it begins with the graveyard with Anjum being there alone, but it ends with the graveyard with Anjum being there with all her group. And by group, I don't only mean the intersex people, as the ones I have mentioned are all there. It's all there. You know, the graveyard has now taken on the appearance more of a cemetery, which is a bigger place, which accommodates, which is more encompassing, you know. And you have Christians, Hindus, Dalits, everyone being buried over here, not restricted to one community. So even though, so the same thing, you know, each one is trying to point out simultaneously what is happening now. And yes, now there is reasons to question what is happening, after, but there, you know, we can look forward. And that is why I said that the arrival of Ms. Jabin Datu, who is a child born out of the violence of rape. At times her arrival has been described in the language of the arrival of Jesus Christ. So if that is going to herald a new day. So on the same note, I felt all, you know, both authors were ending all three literary texts. Okay, Mashroor.
Yeah. Okay, I think question or observation. So yes, we can now take it to the end, to the closure. And so yes, so I mean, the way the novel, The God of Small Thing ends, that is the word tomorrow, that reminds us of another tomorrow at the end of a novel, that is by Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Petals of Blood. And there in that novel, a character asked the question, what is peace? Is peace does peace mean peace of nothing happening? So that somehow we can connect with the question of silence that today's talk broaches. That is, silence does not mean that nothing offensive happens. Rather, silence itself is a discourse that becomes trauma, a trauma that haunts, a trauma that may also be a signal of immunity. Now, this silence may also generate amnesia, generate forgetting. Now, if forgetting the event of abuse is a survival mechanism, it also lets trauma remain, not to come. Therefore, sharing, as the today's speaker suggests, sharing is important, even if it is sharing between two victims. What is more important probably is to share the events of trauma with the others. The other include the ones who are not affected, and even the ones who commit. Therefore, particularly in a discussion on Talash, the speaker talked about post-memory. And we find that Talash is significant as it documents as fiction the trauma of rape experience. It is important as there is hardly any, probably no significant or substantial memory of the Biranganas. Now, if this is silence, it has much to do with shame and stigma that we, the society, still attaches to rape, not to the rapist's stigma, but stigma that we attach to the victims of rape. The question that Professor Shireen Huq raised is, what will be the post-memory generation of the Biranganas? What do or what will the post-71 generations know about the rape events in 1971 or any kind of rape events during or outside work? Now, this uncomfortable silence has therefore not made things or spaces better anywhere. Instead, this silence has left unsafe places unsafe again. And somehow all this somehow jeopardize our very comfortable notion of what is home and safe and what is not home and unsafe. And this may lead us to a Freudian unhomeliness or the uncanniness, something that is known to us but remains unapproached. So with this, we would like to take our program to close. I would like to thank the speaker, Professor Shireen Huq, for giving us time for this exciting speech. I would like to thank the Department of English for all help. Professor Laizuna Nasreen, who is present. Professor Dr. Saniyat Sattar for all the technological things. Ibrahim Kundakar for taking care of the technological thing. And Dr. Raihan Sharif for helping with the program. And of course, I would like to thank the audience who have been there for long and made this session more interactive and exciting. So as I said that these things will continue in our webinar sessions. And in the next week, we'll have a young researcher symposium, and we will have 2 or more Indian speakers and who will talk about literatures from the margins. It may include from the Dalit to the Tibetan community. Thanks again to our speaker, Professor Shireen Huq, for giving time to us from Canada, and thanks everyone. And we will keep carrying on. We will reach each other, and we will enrich each other. Thank you, all of you, for this session.
Thank you, Masroor. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Take care.